Thanks, Keith. This is the next right thing. I am Debbie Georgianni with religious demonologist Adam Blai. We are the co-hosts of The Spirit World, heard on Saturdays right here on the Guadalupe Radio Network and broadcasted on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. We're going to be in Dallas, Adam, and this Saturday. And because of that, I wanted to go into a little more detail about sacramentals and relics, because there's been a lot of talk about one of the relics that you're going to be traveling from Pittsburgh with to Dallas. And just a couple things. I want to ask you some details about it, and I want you to go over it again, because I think folks deserve to understand how sacramentals are a necessary part of our spiritual lives if we look at them and use them properly. So let's go into that part, Adam. So start with sacramentals, and then also tell us what sacramentals are brought into the exorcism work you do on a weekly basis.
Okay. So sacramentals, if we were to look them up in, the church's books and look them up in the catechism, they are objects that are blessed that help prepare us for the sacraments. So it's an interesting twist that we usually don't think of, but really their purpose is to prepare us to participate in the sacramental graces. Now, the most common one most people are familiar with, even non-Christians, is holy water, from the movies. And this is water that is blessed by a priest, and during the blessing, the priest will ask God to give that water particular properties of either healing or of driving away demons, or of providing comfort or peace to a home, that type of thing. So the church provides a wide range of sacramentals, like rosary beads. Those are both a tool to help us pray, but they're also a sacramental because they encourage us to pray. They are often blessed by a priest, so they're a holy object. And that prayer life helps motivate us and prepare us to go to Mass, to do the right things, to reflect on the gospel, etc. So holy water, rosaries, most people don't know, but if you look at, say, we take your favorite saint, Deb, think of Padre Pio. His robe and the cincture around his waist and every piece of that outfit are sacramentals that have particular blessings.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you a couple important details to what you just said, and I loved how you started it. Sacramentals get us prepared to really enter into our sacraments in a deeper way, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. They're not superstitious objects to be used in a way like, oh, okay, if I have this blessed object, this is going to protect me in this situation, or I better turn the statue, a quarter turn, facing the window, because somehow this is going to be an added protection. When you start getting into that part of the use of sacramentals, then it doesn't become effective at all, right?
Yeah, so when people use sacramentals as if they are magical talismans that have a guaranteed effect, that is essentially a form of superstition, where I say, this is going to have this, usually some extreme effect that I'm imagining simply because of the object itself. And that's when it becomes superstition. Think of the rabbit's foot. We, commonly people say, oh, a rabbit's foot is lucky, just by the nature of being a rabbit's foot. So if somebody were to use holy water and say, well, this, even though I don't believe in God, I don't believe in any of this, but, this is magic and it's going to help me in this situation, it would have no effect whatsoever. So here's the key phrase, Deb. The effect of sacramentals is in proportion to which the user has faith.
Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted you to say. But hold on a minute, though. A person who is superstitious can also have a lot of faith. So how do you balance that?
Well, it's the person that's superstitious, again, is essentially saying that this object is what is powerful or is going to have the effect, versus my interacting with God in using this object. So when I bless myself with holy water, it's out of love of God and gratitude to him for providing this holy water, which is a reminder of what? It's a reminder of my baptismal experience and my baptismal promises. So the use of the water, it's not in the water itself, which would be the superstitious approach, but it's in the relationship with God and his church, which is hearkening to my baptismal promises and graces.
Okay, so let me stop you right there because this is interesting. You know where I'm going with this, Adam, and we're going to be doing future shows on this, on the spirit world. There are many cultures that weave in superstitious beliefs, but they are very faith-based people in general, and they have figured out a way to bring both in. And they said, "Oh, this is just part of our culture." Okay, no, this is part of our faith. Oh, it's fine because it's so. That's their default as they go. Oh, well, this is just part of our culture. Mm-hmm. Which one is the leading factor? Do they have faith or are they superstitious?
Well, you're referring to something called syncretism,
right?
When you have say a Catholic community, a Catholic country, essentially a Catholic culture, that is also weaving in superstitious beliefs. So like a common one that a lot of Italians are familiar with is the little gold Italian horn kind of pendant that you will see a lot of young Italians wearing, where in some cases they'll even ask a priest to bless it, thinking that it has a superstitious protective, and actually you could fill me in, Deb, on this. I don't
that
know
is
all
correct,
the things
what
associated.
You're saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
They believe it has some kind of efficacy of protection, but it's not at all, as far as I know, based in any Catholic Christian symbolism or a reference to the faith.
Right. Right. So with this syncretism, so where do the sacramentals, are they still effective? Does God understand that there's a cultural thing that's playing into this? Because a culture is part of a person's being. That's part of who they are. That's how they identify. That's how they group together. That's how they go out into the world by these characteristics. So what do you? I mean, obviously they should get rid of all those superstitious items. Obviously, that's an obvious thing that would be the next right thing. But does one tend to take over more, or what would you say to that? So basically you're saying there's no way to bring both of them in together. You really should get rid of the cultural superstitious things.
Well, here's the thing, Deb. In most cases, when we look at problems that come out of syncretism, the combining of the Catholic faith with local indigenous folk beliefs, is they're a little bit more extreme than just the Italian horn pendant that a lot of Americans are familiar with. There are places, for instance, in South America where people are very Catholic, but when they get sick, they go to a local witch doctor or a brujeria or a figure that's a folk healer that is not at all using, well, actually, sometimes they may have a veneer of Catholic symbolism, but they're using divination, they're using spells and potions, and there are places where people see no problem with that. Mm-hmm. Or if they have an enemy, they go to the local witch to curse them. And they may not see a problem with that because they say, well, they cursed me, so now I need to pay to have them cursed or protect myself, and et cetera, et cetera. So when we think about syncretism, it's usually a little more serious than just the pendant being associated with the Italian culture, but it's actually getting into idolatry and essentially magic.
Okay, so you see where I'm going with this, where people will say, well, it's kind of no different, I'm just bringing in these items, and this is, as long as I stay very, Catholic, and I'm very focused on God, this is all, this can all be part of it. It really isn't. It really is problematic. It should be peeled away and disregarded, and just stay focused on what is truly a sacred object from our Christian belief, rather than these other things that somehow produce some kind of, like you said, magical, healing or some kind of expression of something. So I want to get into that more on the other side of this break, Adam, because are you seeing it in the work that you're doing, people who are coming in and they have these pagan, items or things that they have leaned on for so many years. Is that part of it? Does that open the door for things to start happening? I want to get into that and really talk about how we are to properly handle sacred objects and images that really can help us in our spiritual lives.
So the answer to the question, actually, Deb, is all the time. It's so common that people will call in, they'll tell me their story about what's going on in their home, and it turns out that they've gone to 2 or 3 other organizations or the local, New Age shop, even a local person to cast spells. They've brought crystals into the house. They've brought, supposedly special coins or, sage, salt that isn't blessed, and all these things, when they bring them in, have made things worse. I hear it every single time. Things got precipitously worse as soon as they bring these things in. And when they come to the church, it's usually after everything else fails. And the first thing we have to do is remove all those objects and explain to the person that they've put their faith in an object as opposed to in God and their relationship with God.
We were talking off air about this, that sometimes people culturally fall into some superstitious practices or beliefs. And, oftentimes people will maybe replace those kinds of cultural things that they have grown up with sacramentals. Like, okay, so I'll take away the rabbit's foot, and now I'll add this metal, this blessed metal, with a saint on it, and I'll put that in the house, and that's what's going to protect me. And so you exchange one superstitious thing, and then you try to adopt a sacramental. But Adam, I struggle with this because I've said this so many times in religious education, but I want to get into the details of what you do on a weekly basis in exorcisms, because these sacramentals, when the faith is there, are very powerful items. They're very powerful, blessed objects that have an effect on us and the way we look at things. And then tell us what they have done in the work with possession cases.
Yeah, so I think you're right on, Deb. It's the kind of disordered approach and use of sacramentals that can become a problem. We need to remember, it's what we said at the opening. They prepare us for the sacraments. They shouldn't be the end of your religious life. So in the exorcism work, yes, holy water is used, blessed crucifix is used, the priest stole, which is a sacramental. Most people don't realize that, but that is a blessed item that has a particular sacramental character. It also symbolizes the priest's authority over what God has put under them, including the demons, and so the demons don't like the stole. But sometimes we will use a large Benedict medal. You don't have to, but you could. We have used blessed bells. Most people don't know that the old blessing for church bells were such that the sound would drive away the demons from the parish, so the people could not be distracted from coming to Mass and could pray more freely during Mass. You can do a similar blessing on a small bell, so that can become a sacramental that most people aren't aware of. There can be other holy metals that you might use. Icons are sacramentals that we use in exorcism sometimes. You don't have to, but it can be very nice because the icon is not only a holy image that's a window to what it portrays, which is the theology of icons, but it's a good reminder to the human being that you're working with to be encouraged in their relationship. For instance, in the Divine Mercy image, where they can look at the face of Christ looking at them, it's an encouragement to them during the exorcism when the person is present and using their body. But we don't let it become a disordered thing where we think that the item supersedes the prayers of the church. And the last thing we use, of course, is a relic, which really, it's not so much a sacramental, it's a different thing, because it's not something that's created by the church. It's something that is part of a saint or touched to a saint that wasn't created by the church. The grace that that saint embodied was given by God.
Right. So it's not exactly a sacramental in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here's why we decided to do this segment of The Next Right Thing, focusing on this. I had an encounter with a friend recently, And I noticed that, and she's very, very wonderful. She's beautifully, I think she's very holy. She goes to mass very often. She said adoration. She prays the rosary. She's just really lives out her Catholic faith. And recently I noticed that she has an abundance of sacramentals on her. Medals, blessed medals of saints, in abundance, okay, more so than ever. And in her purse, and she carries stuff in her car and everything. And I do as well, believe it or not, I do too. But I've kind of always been that way, but I'm talking about this is like an overabundance. And so I asked the question, I said, why? And she says, oh, all the more protection. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel like that statement is another kind of fear-based situation where we're like, okay, if I put this medal or I put this mini statue or I put this right in front of me, I'm going to be completely, protected. And so we have to have the faith over the fear more so than that item, correct?
Yeah, Deb. There's a number of kind of aspects to that we don't have time for all of them, but that are very interesting. So yes, I do think it is something that's a little out of balance when you get there. So first off, I would say that I think it's fair to say, and usually a spiritual director, I would think most spiritual directors would encourage you to have one or two particular devotions beyond the required aspects of the faith, as opposed to having 10 or 15 different devotions, because a human only has so many hours in the day and so much energy. And so to spread yourself amongst so many leads to having no depth in any of them. So a common devotion is to Mary for a Catholic. You could have a lot of depth there. But trying to explore and have a relationship with 15 different saints and learn their stories and learn prayers associated with them and all of the things that they're supposed to help you with, it can become very shallow. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. Second thing is it becomes superstitious when you start saying, like, there's a guaranteed effect of this. Really, that's contrary to Scripture, I believe, because we know that God will allow a certain amount of trials in life, a certain amount of suffering.
Right.
And we know that he will allow temptation, which is the flesh, the world, and the devil. So temptation involves the demons. And we know that's allowed. So there's no medal we can get that's going to nullify temptation and make God stop allowing that, because it's part of the journey in life. And so there's this idea where I can somehow safeguard against what God allows in my life. And the final thing I would say is the teaching that God gives us what we can handle. Or another way to look at it, gives us only what he gives us the grace to handle. Right. As opposed to allowing things that overwhelm us.
Right. Because here's what always scares me. Like, what happens if somebody who's carrying like 90 medals with them, blessed objects with them, and all of a sudden, they lose them or something happens, or they left them at home. Are they now feeling vulnerable? Are they now feeling like, oh my goodness, the demons are going to go all around me? See, that to me is such a fear-driven type of dependency. Mm-hmm. Because we should feel very confident in our own baptism, in our own, you know what I'm saying, where what we believe in. So I guess I want to really focus on the faith over that fear.
Exactly, Deb. So the relationship with Jesus, particularly embodied in the sacraments, is what we should have faith in, and in Scripture. That Jesus said, "Nobody will take this one out of my hand." The love that he has for us. These things we should have faith in and confidence in. Mm-hmm. We learn this in the exorcism world. You have to have faith and confidence in Jesus's presence, protection, his sovereignty over all of these things, because that's all you have when you walk into that room. And it is ironclad. It's very real. It's very true. But you can't rely on anything else. He is the source of any protection that comes from those medals and those sacraments. Mm-hmm. And being the source, he is the place you need to put your focus.
Amen. Okay, so proper use of the sacramentals for our very rich Christian, our Catholic Christian life. I love it. Okay, we're going to send it back to Keith for now for the rest of Morning Joy.